5 expeditions set out. None of them came back the way they planned. We tend to blame the ice, or the desert, or bad luck. But look closely at any of these disasters and you find the same thing. The fatal decision was made long before anyone got cold. It was made at a desk, in a warm room, by someone who was certain he already knew enough. Welcome to Ranked History, where we rank the past so you don't have to repeat it. Here are the rules. Every expedition on this list set out on purpose, with a plan and a budget. We are not ranking them by how many died. We are ranking them by one question. How much of the disaster was already decided before they left home? Number 5 is the most famous failure in exploration. And it might not be a failure at all. Number 5. Robert Scott, the British Navy officer who went to the South Pole. He set out in 1911 to be first, but a Norwegian team led by Roald Amundsen got there 5 weeks ahead of him. So Scott reached the pole and found a tent already standing there. He read the note left inside it. Then he turned around and started walking 800 miles home. He never made it. All 5 men in his party died on the way back. For a long time, the story was simple. Scott was a bungler. He chose ponies over dogs. He made his men haul their own sledges. A famous book said so, decades later, and that version stuck. But then a scientist went back to his diaries. She checked his temperature readings against the modern record. The cold he described was worse than anything measured there since. That is where it sits now. The weather he walked into really was brutal. Whether that explains the deaths or only softens the plan is still argued. He is number 5 because so little was settled before he left. Even the size of his final team changed at the last minute. He added a 5th man to a tent built for 4. Number 4. 3 men, a camel train, and the worst 9 hours in Australian history. They put a police officer in charge. His name was Robert Burke, and he had never explored anything. The plan was to cross the continent from south to north. A support party would wait for them at a creek in the desert, with the food for the journey home. Burke made it north. He and his second-in-command stood in a mangrove swamp and could go no further. So they turned around. They walked back to the creek. But the support party had given up and left that morning. Burke's men arrived that evening. Burke had missed them by about 9 hours. They were not alone out there. The Yandruwanda people lived on that country, and they fed all 3 survivors for weeks. Then Burke fired his pistol at one of them. The Yandruwanda left. Burke died. His second-in-command died. The 3rd man went back to the Yandruwanda alone and asked for help. That man came home. It is only number 4 because so much of it turned on chance. Half a day either way and everyone lives. Number 3. A British expedition sailed north in 1845 to find a route through the Arctic. 2 ships went. 129 men went with them. Not one came back. They were well supplied on paper. They carried years of tinned food. What they did not carry was a plan for what to do when the ice did not melt. It did not melt. So the ship stuck fast and stayed stuck, and the men began to die. For decades, everyone blamed the tins. The theory was lead poisoning from bad soldering. It was a tidy answer, and it made sense. Recent work has taken it apart. Their bones were full of lead, but so were most British bones at the time. The tins were probably not the source. The lead was probably not the cause. We still do not know what was. Inuit families in the area knew what had happened. They said so, clearly, at the time. London did not want to hear it. A Scottish doctor brought their account home. Charles Dickens went into print and called them liars. Both ships were found a century and a half later. One lay in the water Inuit families had pointed to for generations. The other turned up after an Inuk hunter mentioned a mast he had seen through the ice. It is number 3, because the plan had no second answer. Everything they needed was in the hold. They had no way to live off that country, and no one aboard could ask the people who already did. Number 2. In 1897, a Swedish engineer decided to fly a balloon to the North Pole. His name was Salomon Andrée. 3 men would go up together and drift north on the wind. There was one problem with the plan. Balloons do not steer. His answer was ropes trailing on the ice to drag against the wind and push the balloon sideways. But that had never been shown to work. Neither had the balloon. It arrived from Paris untested. One colleague did test it late on. The balloon was leaking badly. It lost enough gas each day to matter, and the trip would take weeks. So that colleague quit the expedition. Andrée flew anyway. They were down on the ice within days. Then they walked for about 80 days, dragging sledges toward land. They reached a small island and died there. Nobody found them for 33 years. A sealing ship stumbled onto their last camp in 1930. Their diaries were still readable. So was the film in one man's camera. We still argue about what killed them. Bad meat, scurvy, a bear, the fumes from their stove. Nobody has proved any of it. He is number 2 because chance barely got a say. The balloon was already failing on the ground. Everything after that was just the ice taking its time. Number 1. This one did not just kill the people on it. It helped end a country. Scotland was poor and wanted a colony. Investors picked a spot on the coast of Panama in a region called Darien, but nobody from the company went to look at it first. They chose it from a book written by a man who had passed through years earlier. 5 ships sailed from Scotland in 1698. 1,200 settlers were on board. Look at what they packed. Heavy woolen cloth, tartan, fancy wigs, crates of leather shoes. They were sailing to the tropics with a cargo for a Scottish winter. They did have help. The Guna people met them on the beach, brought food, and agreed to protect them. It was not enough. The site was swamp. The rain was constant. Disease went through the settlement, and the land they had chosen belonged, as far as Spain was concerned, to Spain. The colony was abandoned. Of the 1,200 who sailed, only a few hundred came home. Across the whole venture, around 2,000 people died, and the money was gone. Ordinary people had put their savings into it. A large share of the nation's spare cash went down with the colony. A few years later, Scotland signed away its parliament and joined with England. Historians still argue about how much of that was Darien, but the deal that ended Scottish independence included a payment. That payment went to the people who had lost their money in Panama. That is number 1. Wrong place, wrong cargo, wrong century to annoy Spain. Every part of it was decided before a single ship left. So there it is. A weather report, a missed appointment, a frozen fleet, a leaking balloon, and a swamp that cost a kingdom. Notice what almost none of these men were killed by. Not the unknown. They were killed by things that were already true when they packed. One of them survived by walking back to the people whose land it was and asking for help. That is the whole difference. Tell me I have ranked these wrong. I probably have. That is what the comments are for. I'm going to go and check the weather before I leave the house.